Thank you, Marisa. Fabian, any compliment?
Actually, I totally agree with all the opinions, and it's I think that you cannot justify to achieve goal based on unethical practices. So it's called unethical success. It's not, it affects the company or the organization internally. Nobody wants to work with a cheating company, but also externally because no one wants to deal or have agreements or deals with companies that have a culture opposite to the ethical culture, a culture in which no matter what you do to achieve what you have to achieve. So no one wants to work with a company like that. So I totally agree with the opinion of my colleagues.
Thank you. And for the third one, we're going to change subject to the whistleblowing protection. And I want to do a package of different questions because the most voted one was, can a company claim to support whistleblowing if no one has ever come forward? So you have a whistleblowing channel, but no one uses. Can you claim that you support whistleblowing if this happens? But we have a couple of questions on the Q&A around the same topic. We have one from Ecuador, for example, saying that, is it enough to have internal whistleblowing channel, or is it indispensable, for example, or very necessary to hire external independent whistleblowing channels, especially in a context in where everybody knows each other? And so that's the question from Pamela. We had another one. So many questions. That's awesome. Da-da-da. There is the best. It was a nice one that I wanted to. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to find the question here. But the question around
I think
whistleblowing channel.
there was one from André from Brazil saying, how do you protect the whistleblower when he's the only person that has
Thank you,
that
Marisa.
saw the wrongdoing, right? I was about to answer it when you start talking and I stopped answering because of that.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. I think some people answered the questions and they went to another place, but we have a lot of questions around whistleblowing, and it was the same for our kickoff webinar. So can you claim to support whistleblowing if no one comes forward? Do you need an external independent whistleblowing channel in an environment in which everybody knows each other? There was also a question about how can you protect whistleblowers? How can people come forward without fear of retaliation? Marisa, do you want to start since you were typing the answer? Sorry, Vanessa raised her hand. Vanessa, please go
No,
ahead.
no, all good, all good. I'm sure we'll complement each other anyway. Um, I mean, the first thing, it's again, we've talked about, this culture of integrity and trust. So that's maybe the number one response. But I'd like to take a slightly different route to answer this question because we've been doing a lot of work on how can you say that your anti-corruption compliance program is actually effective. And so it's not just about no whistleblowing reports or many, because a lot or little, I mean, what does it really tell you, right? So, end of the day, some of the practices that we've seen from companies is to look at other data points and to see if employees felt kind of safe to report, right? So, metrics around culture, psychological safety, making sure that employees felt comfortable reporting things, and also taking other metrics such as number of whistleblower reports that were not done anonymously, right? Because if you're reporting without this cover of anonymity, it means that to some extent you trust the process. And so I think it's a very interesting conversation because having a whistleblower hotline is, of course, very important, but what is even more important is what you do with it and how you treat this information. And then also how quickly you treat it, because we've also seen organizations where people raise issues and then in the end nothing happens, or at least they've never been made aware of potential next steps or follow-ups. And that's also a bit of an issue in terms of trust. So yeah, so that would be my view is to say, well, 0 is not good, but a lot is maybe not good either, right? So, but I'm sure colleagues have additional views.
Yeah, I can go now, so I complement to that. No, I love those questions because, working in company, this is actually, whenever we do like compliance committees, that's the sexiest part of the compliance program. That's what everybody wants to know about the investigations and number of cases and things like that, and how people trust or don't trust the system. So I've been lucky enough to always work in bigger companies. So they always had an external hotline. Okay. And whenever I train, I really highlight this because I want people to understand that nobody in the company has any type of management of that external hotline. So I think it's important, but I know it's not necessarily a reality for all companies. So you really need to have some form or way of people to report. Ideally, if you have the money, if you have everything, an external one is safer and people tend to trust. But that's not true, actually. And we have to be working on the trust every day. And you work on the trust exactly with all those components, so having a proper whistleblower policy and really applying it. So whenever you feel you receive a report of retaliation, you investigate properly and you have the consequences, the time you spend on investigations. So if you take too much to do an investigation, people tend to lose trust. So you have to have agility, how do you communicate with the whistleblower, to maintain integrity? So in the case of the question of André from Brazil, that's why the investigation is so important, because although you have one person only that saw the wrongdoing, you as a compliance function, you will be able to find other evidences, a group of evidences, that will we maintain the anonymously portion of the whistleblower, because this is also important. We have to maintain them confidential, or they treat and everything else. There's a lot of discussion on what do you give it back once you finalize an investigation. So I know some companies, they report to the reporter saying, we have completed, and this was the result. Some other companies simply say we have completed, and that causes a lot of confusion sometimes because people don't really know the results and they want to know results. I defend that you shouldn't be telling the results to people, because what is important is that they have reported and then an investigation was conducted. But also another thing that I know several companies do, and it's really good, is a kind of a year report on Speak Up. So then you show statistics, just like Vanessa was telling, how many cases we had, how many cases were substantiated, what types were the most common cases that we had, what type of disciplinary measures we had. So you give some form of information internally to the audience, to the public, to the employees. So you show that you're doing the work without really compromising, the system. So, but I think being really strong and having zero tolerance for retaliation is the way really to protect. And that's what most companies do. They are really, they have a separated investigation on retaliation. Some companies, in this cases, it's those that are the cases taken to the senior leadership for decision making. So all those rules internally support the trust. But believe me, because I do every year training and communications on the Speak Up, because despite all that, people don't believe. Because I made a joke. Human beings love to gossip and love to say things around, and no matter how much we try to say things are confidential, there's always spread, as they say in Spanish, rádio pasillo, in Portuguese, rádio peão, or in the grapevine, as we say in English. Always people learn about investigation. This is our job to try to then help understand that it didn't come from us. It didn't come from the compliance function.
Thank you, Marisa. Carolina?
Yeah, I want to complement a little bit, especially with the views of the small and medium enterprise, because of course, it's more difficult for a small company to maintain even anonymity, because you have a finance department of 4 people, and when one person makes a compliance, like is a whistleblower, then it's very easy to identify who did it and who knows about the problem. So we see this challenge, and that is one thing I want to say, and I think it's good to be honest and open about that. So there is a bigger challenge to maintain this anonymity. And for me, what help at least companies, the small and medium enterprise that we work with, is what happens before the presentation of something in the whistleblower channel. For example, at the very beginning, how many people use this whistleblower channel also to make questions, or how many people talk with the responsible of integrity and compliance. So maybe you don't receive a compliance specifically in the whistleblower channel, but you receive before a lot of questions about process, a lot of questions about, is this right or wrong? And this is already a very strong culture of integrity and speak up, even though it's not coming through the channel. And on the other hand, of course, what Marisa was telling, of course, an external whistleblower channel helps a lot, as well as small and medium enterprise, to give trust to this channel, especially if they are small. But of course, you have the topic of cost. And there I go back to the topic that Vanessa mentioned, collective action and working together. I see more and more external whistleblower channels that, for example, are hosted in business associations, and then a lot of small companies are coming together and financing them, and then it's not so expensive as having your own external whistleblower channel. I have a good example of this in Mexico, for example, in the automobile sector, in India as well, in the German Chamber of Commerce. So there is some examples, and I think I recommend and encourage a small and medium enterprise to talk to other SMEs, to talk to other companies, to talk to business association, and look for solutions together in a more collective way.
Thank you, Carolina. Fabian, would you like to add?
Almost everything was already said, so I only would like to say that is my opinion, and it's an advice also. I think that it's important to have internal whistleblowing channels, disregarding if you want to have an external one. I think that it doesn't matter. If you have multiple confidential and anonymous reporting channels, is good for your organization. Actually, you don't have to say, I don't need an internal one because I have an external one, because sometimes when you have only external channels, whistleblowing systems, external, there is a high risk, as I mentioned during the presentation, of some confidential information be available to third parties, because if there are investigations, your company can be exposed, and the confidential information of your company can be exposed during the investigation. And the idea is to try to have and to keep as much as possible all the control of the investigation. But it involves that any investigation should have an outcome. As Marisa said, if you have investigations and you say, okay, I'm collecting the number, as most of companies do. We have 125 investigations pending. We have no results, we have no outcomes. What's going on with the investigation? What was the process? So I think that you should have an internal whistleblowing system with clear rules, establishing clear policies, clear mechanisms, and what is, step by step, what is the path to be followed, and what is the step-by-step way before a sanction, for instance. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. And with that, I will move to our 4th question, but almost tied in the 3rd place, because we also had a similar question in the Q&A. The 4th one was, can a business prioritize stakeholder value and still maintain full ethical integrity in a competitive market? And in a similar way, somebody asked, like, is it really, what was the word used? Is it really possible to keep a zero tolerance policy? Like, should we really focus on that, like zero tolerance against corruption? And finally, in the package, I'm going to put Ricardo's question if in your view, do corporate representatives adopt social environmental responsibility, so this stakeholder value and compliance principles, more as a response to market pressures driven by external demands, or as a conscious choice rooted in a genuine recognition of the importance of integrity? Is it possible or not? Or is just we're just daydreaming that this is possible? Carolina?
I will answer this strongly with a yes. Of course, it's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And I don't say it alone. And I was talking in the preparation before. There is a study that just came up 2 months ago from BU4, this big think tank on anti-corruption integrity, about the commercial success and the business integrity. And in this study came up, especially for a small and medium enterprise, that for example, companies with strong governance and compliance system, they have 68% more chances of winning contracts. So almost 70% more chances that the return for investment in companies that have a strong compliance and integrity system is 20% more than for those that don't have it. So the numbers are showing that it is possible, and it's actually that business integrity is a good business. We have to only look at two things. One is how we show this information to our stakeholders and make sure they know this added value. And the second is, of course, that sometimes you have short terms lost as well. And this is also something we have to be honest and open about it. But how you show it in your long-term sustainability, and how you work with others to deal with these dilemmas, short-term dilemmas, is very important to find long-term solutions. But definitely is possible. And I will share in the chat also this study.
Thank you, Carolina. I think Marisa is next.
Yeah, so I agree with Carolina. When we're talking about corruption, I think it's fully possible. I think it is a way that we're moving, and companies have already understood, and we can do it, and it's good for business. And most of the big companies already understand, and they are fighting, and they do it. So my problem a little bit is with all the other areas we have, from the social responsibility or the ESG or all the other things. So that will rely a lot on the maturity of the company, the strength of the company. As I said, I live currently in US, and what you have seen in the past year since the new administration came is several companies, retreating on their DEI policies, environmental policies, or environmental beliefs, because of the pressure of the administration. So I think only companies that have this really rooted and they understand the importance of that will continue on that road, on that path. And that's the tricky portion. But when you talk about corruption, that is a no-brainer, and all the companies, most of the companies have already understood that is actually a beneficial advantage, instead of like the advantage that the people used to say, this is how we do business in that country, because also, which is so good about all these United Nations and the other global organizations, international organizations, because the countries also start doing their own laws. So most of the countries in the world have laws related to corruption, have enforcement, the collective actions that we have developed with the Global Compact as well. So we work with the sector. So everybody understands that this is better, not only for the company, but for the country, for the community. The rest of the shareholders' values, I think you vary a lot on the moment that the company is, the pressure of the country that the company, the headquarter is. So it changes.
Thank you, Marisa. Vanessa?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's both it's a big yes, but there's a carrot and a stick to it. And I think the stick is quite clear. I mean, we've already talked about it. There are actually legal and financial consequences if you get caught. And so I think there it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, it does also make business sense from that perspective. The carrot element that we also shouldn't forget is access to financing. And we're working a lot also with investors, and investors don't like risk. They like returns, but they don't like risk. And a lot of investors do have conditionalities to loan agreements. They have clear expectations. If you're looking at financing from multilateral development banks, for instance, there are debarment processes if you are caught in a bribery case and so on. So I think from that perspective, even though we're always looking at sort of like short-term returns, investors do also look at these elements and are also very keen to ensure that they're not themselves facing unnecessary risk with companies that are acting unethically. But then maybe the other component to think about in terms of the other topics, right? Broader sustainability related topics, and bring this forward because I'm actually currently in Geneva at the UN Forum on Business and Human Rights. And there's a report of the Council of Europe that was published about 3 weeks ago that was looking at the cost of inaction when it comes to, for instance, human rights topics. So the backlash in terms of also consumers, if for those of you who are tuning in maybe from France can see some of the most recent developments and some of the boycotts of several brands and so on. So I think there is also a little bit of it's also a bit of a choice vis-a-vis the consumers, and I think some of the consumers are making their voice a little bit louder and clearer, and the investors as well. So if you're looking at a constellation of stakeholders, I think there is still a need to add ethically beyond the anti-corruption component, despite some of the shifts in regulations. And I know that, some of the recent developments in the EU are maybe a disappointment to some people in the broader sustainability space. Marisa also alluded to some of the shifts happening in other parts of the world. But I think, end of the day, there is still a push to do the right thing. Whether the company does it because they truly believe in it or because the broader stakeholders are asking for it, it's really difficult to tell, honestly. But as long as we still have these external positive pressures, I think it's the important part there.
And sorry, Anna, if I can add just one sentence on what Vanessa just mentioned, because I think all motivations are valid, no? And when we are training small and medium enterprise, sometimes like a family business is the owner of the family business that says, I want to leave my granddaughter a better world. And this is why I am working on integrity and I don't want corruption anymore. And this is such a strong motivations that we don't need to minimize that. Of course, there is some of them working because of the sanctions, totally, others working because of the external pressure, other because of the business opportunity, and others because of the person motivation. And I think we, as promoters of integrity and anti-corruption, we need to take all of them and try to take the motivation that motivates every company, and that's totally fine wherever they are and where their motivations are.
Thank you, Carolina. Fabian, would you like to complement?
Yes, very quick. I think that a business can prioritize shareholder value and still maintain full ethical integrity. I think that one thing doesn't exclude the other. But only if the company treats ethics as a source of shareholder value, not a constraint on it. So I think that ethical practices, on the one hand, reduce regulatory risk, reduce the risk of employees turnover, lawsuits, but also on the other hand, it increases shareholder value over time. So my advice is be patient. It takes time to develop full ethical integrity culture. But in the long term, it's of course that you can have use ethics as a source of shareholder value. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Fabian. We have so many good questions in the Q&A. We were able to answer the top 4 and a couple of questions from the Q&A as well. And I hope we touched some topics. The good news is, everyone, these challenges, these dilemmas, they are covered by the e-learning Doing Business with Integrity. We have some questions around nepotism, for example. I think it's also a question from Pamela from Ecuador. We had the questions about risks, corruption risks in the construction sector, how we can also keep an eye in our supply chain. Those topics are covered in our e-learning. We have a specific module on third-party corruption, for example, and also corruption, the possibility of corruption in social investment, a little bit tied with construction sector, and you can also see some challenges there. Facilitation payments was also a very hot topic that if we had time, that was going to be my next question to the panelists, because there seems to be a challenge or like a trade-off between facilitation payments and competitiveness. Like, I need to pay because I need to be competitive. We also have a dilemma in the course specifically about facilitation payments, so you can check it out. And as Fabienne pointed out, it's illicit from the UNCAC point of view. So in the long run, it may be not that competitive to pay. We also have questions about what about the most voted questions, having a local cultural mentor to help navigate the local environment regarding what the employees are doing or not locally, or employees who they have a lot of excessive gift giving and how we can train them on that. We also have modules on gifts and hospitalities in the e-learning, so you can also check it out. What is our suggestions on that? And the final questions that I could capture about how we can wake the top, right? The tone from the top, how we can bring the leadership with us. Our panelists and experts, they were just discussing different motivations and incentives for your leadership, so you can use all of them. And we also had a lot of questions on whistleblowing that I hope we were able to cover. With that, I'm going to thank all my dear panelists for this very, very insightful discussion and panel. And I'll give the floor back to Daria for our final remarks. Thank you very, very much.
And each of our experts, it really resonated with me, all the insights that you shared. And thank you again for bringing so much honesty and depth into this conversation.